Welcome to another episode, everyone. Big Devil from 5'9" Hoover was stabbed in Pelican Bay by Little Tweety from Broadway Gangsta Crip. This stabbing indeed ignited a vicious, bloody war. And when all of the smoke cleared, bodies lay dead there on the yard in Pelican Bay. This story has a lot of twists and turns. You must keep up. And this is only part one of what transpired. This happened over a gambling debt. Big Devil, of course, 5'9" Hoover, ended up being unalived there in prison a few years later after this incident. This happened in 1994 in Pelican Bay. But check this out.
So like I said, this story starts out in 1994 at Pelican Bay State Prison. And this particular incident took place on B Yard, which was a level 4 180. In one of the building's day rooms, Little Weedy from 112 Broadway and Big Devil.
And as you can see down here on the bottom, Paradigm News, may not be able to see, this is Paradigm Media News. YouTube channel, Paradigm Media News, shout out.
From 5'9" Hoover were sitting at one of the tables with several other Crips gambling, something that they did daily to pass the time. You know, there's no need for me to elaborate on it because I've already said it, but gambling in prison comes with all kinds of drawbacks. And this story is definitely a good example of what can happen and the consequences that can occur over one single gambling day. So aside from it being a quick way to lose your money and to go into debt, whenever anyone's gambling, no matter who it is, when it gets competitive and someone starts losing, tensions run high, and this is when the chances of it turning physical are almost imminent. Because nobody likes losing, and then when somebody does lose, where do you draw the line? When is it okay to cash out and say, alright, I'm good, I gave you action in winning your bread back, but now I'm gonna cash out and keep my winnings. You know, you might feel like you gave this guy enough action, but now he's $10,000 in the hole, and he's gonna wanna keep you at that table until he either breaks even or until he wins all his money back. And this is usually when conflicts start, as you'll see by what happened between Little Weedy and Big Devil. So Little Weedy had basically cleaned him out and had Big Devil.
Did I say Tweety? Weedy, Little Weedy from Broadway Gangsta Crip.
Deep in the hole. I'm not sure exactly how much it was, but I know that there was 2 cassette tapes that Big Devil also lost, and he wanted those back. According to Little Money, Big Devil said something to the effect of, come on homie, you gonna do me like that? I wouldn't do you like that. Let me just get my runbacks. But Weedy had been out there at the tables gambling since the day room had opened up earlier that morning, and now he was ready to stop, which he was definitely entitled to. You know, technically, Weedy didn't have to give him action and winning nothing back, but him and Devil were cool, and he didn't want to do him like that. So he stayed out there longer than he wanted to. But eventually, it got to a point to where Weedy started to feel like Big Devil was doing too much, and that he was starting to throw his weight around. And Little Weedy wasn't feeling that. On a side note, Little Weedy wasn't a troublemaker, and he wasn't the type of dude that was out there on the yard acting like a bully. But according to Little Money, Little Weedy had about 9 different fights since he had been on that yard, and he had a reputation for having some vicious hands. He had knocked a couple cats out, and he supposedly hit another cat he got into with so hard in the face that he shattered the orbit bones around his eye. So Little Weedy wasn't no slouch, and Big Devil knew this. But the last fight that Little Weedy got into right before this incident was with a Kumi, a 415 out of the Bay Area. And he was a big dude. Little Money said that Weedy told him that when he got into it with this guy, that he clipped him, and that when he was going down, he grabbed Weedy by the legs and wouldn't let go. Weedy said he couldn't get away from this guy, so he said, the next motherfucker I get into it with, I'm stabbing him. You know, he obviously didn't know it at the time, but Big Devil just so happened to be that next guy. Big Devil, on the other hand, wasn't no slouch either. He had some size on him, and unlike Weedy, Big Devil was known for being a bully. He knew that his size used to intimidate certain people, and if he knew you were one of those individuals who was intimidated by his size, then he'd run with it and push it as far as he could go. So, like I mentioned earlier,
and just for the record, that picture right there that he just had shown when he was talking about Big Devil, that is not Big Devil. 5'9" Hoover. Big Devil was indeed a very big, dark-skinned individual. And many people have put this label on him that he was a bully. He was not necessarily a bully. He just stood up for what he believed in. He did stand on business, and he was strict with the rules and protocols there on the level 4 prisons in California. But he was not a bully. If you flouted a rule or a protocol, then yes, he would take care of business, to say the least. And here he is with little Weedy from Broadway, and they gambling at the table. And like Paradigm Media News here says, gambling in prison is a setup waiting to happen. You're going to get yourself in trouble sooner or later. Even if you are the victor, even if you are victorious, even if you are the winner when you're gambling, it can still spell trouble for you because of the individuals who are losing their money do not want to be losing their money. And it creates all sorts of conflict there in prison. As many of you know, I've done over 30 years of incarceration, and I got away from gambling my last few years there for that reason.
In this story, Little Weedy and Big Devil spent a considerable amount of time interacting at the gambling tables, and they had a pretty solid friendship before this incident. But it's not like they were road dogs, and because things played out the way that they did, this drove a wedge between them, and they ended up falling out. In so many words, Devil made it known that he had no intentions on paying Little Weedy what he owed him because he felt like Little Weedy took his money and ran with it. You guys also gotta understand that the thing that made this situation even more complicated was the fact that these guys were also from different sets. Technically, they were considered to be arch enemies on the streets, but when prison politics come into play, a lot of the street politics take a back seat and are considered to be dead issues. But then again, on second thought, even if they were from the same set, that only goes so far when you're dealing with gambling debts and somebody that owes you money in prison. Because then it all comes down to your reputation and how you deal with situations like that. You know, if someone owes you money and they refuse to pay you and you accept this without dealing with that individual, then other people are going to assume that they can treat you the same way. And you're not only going to get taken advantage of, but you're also going to lose respect and develop a reputation for being a chump. At any rate, when Big Devil started beating his chest and he told Little Weedy that he wasn't going to pay him, Little Weedy didn't argue with him and he didn't say nothing else about it. And that's obviously because he already knew exactly what he was going to do. So when all this happened, it was already late in the day and the day was pretty much already over. They ran nighttime program in the buildings later on after chow, but the rest of the day was uneventful. So the following morning, immediately after the first unlock, Little Weedy and Money Rab from Fort Trey Gangster took off on the Hoovers in the building's rotunda. Both of them had bangers and they timed it perfectly. So as the other inmates were making their way into the rotunda to either enter the building or exit out to the yard, they fell back, waited and watched for Devil and two other Hoovers to make their way into the rotunda. For those of you that don't know what a rotunda is, it's like the main thoroughfare or entrance where the inmates either enter or exit the building. There's a small enclosure that's like a hallway that has gates on both ends that open and close. The officer that's up in the control booth is the one that opens and closes these gates. And the officer that's in the gun tower is the one that pushes the buttons that will either open or close these two gates. So what they'll do is they'll open up one gate and they'll leave the other gate closed. They do this so that the inmates will file in and fill it up. Once it's full, the gate behind them shuts and then the other gate will open up that will either allow them to enter into the building or exit out to the yard. But for a brief period of time while they're controlling the gates, all the inmates are locked in the rotunda together. And if someone's going to take off on someone inside the rotunda, it's been a common practice to wait until both gates shut, because then your target's basically trapped inside. Anyways, when the three Hoovers entered the rotunda, Weedy and Money Rab came in from the opposite side and then they initiated the hit. I believe they hit three of them. The main target was obviously Big Devil, and even though the other two didn't have anything to do with the gambling debt per se, they were targeted along with Big Devil based on their affiliation with the Hoovers. That's just how it works. Guilt by association. You know, keep in mind, it was still early in the morning when they moved on these guys, so they still had cornflakes in their eyes, and they caught them completely off guard.
Yes, and that is exactly how it works there in prison, which is why I always say that you have to follow these rules and protocols, or you will be bloodily removed from the yard, because and your own people, your own faction, your own section are going to be the ones who remove you from the yard, because what you do reflects upon them. What you do can get them stabbed. What you do can get them in trouble. What you do can cost them their lives. So if you're out there on the yard doing crazy stuff, not following the rules, messing with people, getting into debts, getting into conflicts, and you're from a certain car, then that car has to set you down and tell you what you're doing is out of pocket, not a line. And you either stop it or we're going to crash you. Not because we're afraid of anyone else, but because we don't want to put our life on the line because you're out here acting foolish. Because when you get into it with someone, that whole hood that you're claiming, that whole car, that whole faction is in jeopardy of going to war. So you have to check your own people. Here we had the situation here where because Devil got into it over a gambling debt, because Devil didn't want to pay, so the story goes, they come at the Devil as to stab him, but whoever's with him from his same car, from his same faction, they know that they're not going to stand by and let them stab them, so they have to start attacking them too to get the up on them. And so, and as he said, those two individuals had nothing to do with it. I'm out here getting stabbed up now because you didn't want to pay your debt or because you got into it over a gambling debt or whatever. Even if you were right in the situation with the gambling situation, at the end of the day, we still getting stabbed over it. This is why people say you shouldn't be gambling in prison. But just to stress the point that this is why individuals will check you when you get out of line, when you're gambling, not paying the debt, using drug, whatever, and not paying like you're supposed to. Your homies are going to check you, because if they don't, then you get into a situation like Devil did and weapons are drawn and people are stabbed, then that involves everyone. Like it involves those two Hoovers sitting there in the rotunda that had nothing to do with it, but they still got stabbed.
Incident from beginning to end lasted for about 3 minutes. I'm not sure who the third one was, but they hit Big Devil and Warlock from 9 Deuce Hoover. So as soon as the gunner in the control booth seen the commotion, he opened up both doors, hit the alarm, chambered around, and ordered all the inmates that were in the building and out on the yard to get out on the ground. And they did. They all complied. And then at that point, they went through the whole routine of cuffing everybody up that was involved and taking them off the yard one by one. So because this was an incident that involved Crips on Crips, they basically just slammed them down for about a day or two, and they let everybody else continue the program. I believe Little Money said the longest they were locked down was for like a day or two. But during the time when they were on lockdown, the Hoovers ran their own investigation, looking into the reasons why this escalated beyond Big Devil and Little Weedy. They wanted to know why 2 other Hoovers were hit that didn't have nothing to do with that situation, and they also wanted to know if anyone else was involved. What it all came down to is that they were out for blood. 3 Hoovers got hit and they wanted to run it back on someone. Typical prison politics. And it didn't take long for them to come up with a potential target either. You know, when something like this happens and people start whispering out there on the yard, there's always those that are more than willing to throw people under the bus and instigate conflict, because that's just what they do. And that's what happened. Apparently, someone told the Hoovers that Mad Dog from Front Street Watts was the one that gave Little Weedy and Money Rab the knives to hit Big Devil, Warlock, and the other Hoover that was hit in the rotunda. So fast forward a day or two later, after they lift the lockdown and let the Crips out.
Yeah, and that's just how it is there in prison. You're going to find out exactly what happened because individuals there run their mouths to the police and to other inmates, and you do a so-called investigation, if you will, to find out exactly what caused the incident, who was behind it, who was involved. And when you are seeking blood, when you're out for blood, out for retribution, then you're going to involve anyone who was involved or who involved themselves. If you gave these individuals the knives and they concluded this after their thorough investigation, then you're going to be a target because you gave them the knives to stab their homies. So yeah, that's not good.
Program with everyone else. So that same day, the Hoover sent a youngster named Little Pup from 7-4 Hoover to hit Mad Dog for supposedly giving Little Weedy and Money Rab the weapons. But this youngster Little Pup had never stabbed anyone in prison before, and he was highly inexperienced. This was the first time he had ever stabbed anyone, and according to Little Money, he was visibly skittish and didn't know what he was doing. Little Money said he watched this youngster come out of his building and make a beeline across the yard for Mad Dog. And when he got close, he tried to snake him and hit him in his back. And he did. And he was actually able to stab him, but it was done so light that the weapon barely penetrated his shirt and his skin. In fact, it was done so light that when Pup hit Mad Dog thought he tapped him on his back to shake his hand. So when Mad Dog turned around, he put his hand out. I guess it didn't occur to Mad Dog that this youngster had poked him until he looked down and seen the knife in his hand. After that, coupled with the expression on his face, it then registered what had happened. But before Mad Dog could react, Little Pup turned around, hit the burners, and took off towards his building. And then when he got close to his building, he tossed the weapon and shot straight inside the rotunda. From the Hoovers' perspective, it was a complete fail. But the responsibility was theirs because they should have never sent a youngster who was half cocked. He wasn't laced up and he was scared, so they had to own that one. But anyways, after this second incident, nothing happens on the yard for a couple of days. But just keep in mind, for the purpose of this story, that this one gambling debt has already resulted in...
Okay, so just so that we're keeping up, the Hoovers have identified Mad Dog from Watts, from Front Street Watts Crip, as being the individual who gave Little Weedy and the other individual that was there in the rotunda, the Sally Port they also call it, with Lil Weedy, gave them the weapons, at least one of the weapons, all of the weapons, whatever. And certainly he knew what the weapons were for, man. We need some weapons, we got to get on these dudes from Hoover, man. These dudes, whatever the situation was. So the Hoovers went on lockdown for a day or so only. Everyone else also, or certain factions, did their own investigation and found out who gave him the knives. Mad Dog. So they, according to the narration, they sent a young dude. I don't know of a Little Pup from. I'm not going to get into that. It's probably. I think I know what you're talking about. But either way, he sent someone else to stab Mad Dog for giving this dude the knives. He hit him in the back, scratched him, poked him, whatever. Didn't do anything.
3 stabbings and an attempted stabbing. So 5 Crips have already been taken to ADSA. You got Little Weedy from 112 Broadway Crip, Big Devil from 59 Hoover, Warlock from 9 Deuce Hoover, and the 3rd Hoover that was also stabbed. Little Pup didn't get caught, and Mad Dog just basically walked away. They didn't get caught, so they both stayed out on the yard. But this was just the start of this little fiasco. There was still a lot to come. So over the next few days after this youngster, Little Pup, tried to stab Mad Dog, the yard starts talking and people start trying to stir the pot. All the instigators start chirping about how Mad Dog didn't do nothing after this youngster tried to stab him in the back, that he needs to get his run backs, etc., etc. But this is the thing, at the time that happened, Mad Dog had a good thing going where he was getting weed sent in through his radio. I'm not sure exactly how he was doing it, but that ain't important. The bottom line is, he was getting it in, and he obviously didn't want to lose that plug. And he knew that if he got rolled up and went to the hole, that plug was definitely going to get shut down. But regardless to how good something like that might be, you got to draw the line somewhere, especially when your name rides on it. And that's what Mad Dog did. During the few days immediately after Little Pup poked Mad Dog in the back and nothing happened on the yard, there was no movement on Mad Dog's part because he was waiting for his next shipment to come in. So according to Little Money, Mad Dog had a street knife smuggled in and he was safe keeping it somewhere. But Little Money knew he had it. So when Mad Dog finally got his package, that same day, he got the knife from wherever he was having it safe kept, rolled it up in a piece of newspaper, put it under his arm, and then he went to work. Little Money...
Okay, and a lot of times there is a lot of pressure involved there on the yard. Something happens to you, you're going to be expected to respond, to retaliate. And if you do not respond and retaliate, then you are forever a coward in everyone's eyes, and you have to get off the yard yourself. At the end of the day, when the smoke clears, you will no longer be an individual with a strong reputation, which causes you havoc there in prison if you do not have one. So Mad Dog apparently felt the pressure to do something about this. This youngster, though he did not penetrate, though he did not hurt me, I thought he was tapping me on the back. That's how much damage he did. I thought he was tapping me to turn around and I'm about to shake his hand until I seen a knife in his hand. But meanwhile, he didn't stab me. And everyone on the yard knows it. Or tried to stab me, whatever. So now after he gets his last sack in, or get a sack in that he had been waiting on, now it's his turn to go to work. Mad Dog. He's upset. He feels pressure. This is an individual from Front Street Watts. We'll pick it up in part 2, which I will bring you all today. This is where we're leaving off at. Mad Dog has gotten his sack in and has now gathered himself up a weapon, a knife, and is looking to respond for being poked in the back, for giving these individuals, Lil Weedy and them, the knives to begin with. This is why he got poked. But regardless of why you get stabbed, you have to do something about being stabbed. Even if he was wrong, you still have to do something about being stabbed. So now he's looking to go back out there and holler at the individual who tried to poke him, Pup, or whomever else, any other Hoover that he can get his hands on, I'm sure. And things go very left with that situation. There's a lot more to come. Mad Dog does go out and hit the yard with his weapon. And when the smoke clears, someone loses their life. Someone doesn't make it out of the situation. But the war is just really getting started and escalating, as we can see. They're going back and forth. Weapons are being drawn. This is Pelican Bay. This is 1994. Things were really real then. And there's a lot of violence and bloodshed. And it all began over playing cards, over gambling, over supposedly someone not wanting to pay the debt. I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know what exactly happened there. By the time the story gets 30 years later, it's watered down and it took a few twists and turns and been some add-ons and some subtractions and everything else to the story. So who knows exactly what happened? I'm sure roughly this is about it. I do know about the situation somewhat here. I do know what happened. It was bad. That's for sure. It was bad. We'll continue in part 2 and see what happens with Mad Dog when he comes out with his weapon now, looking for some get back for being poked in the back. Things go left. Things go awry. And I'll bring it to you in part 2. When the Crips stabbed the Hoovers over a gambling debt and someone ends up dead. War ensues and people lose their lives, and it's that serious behind these walls. We'll get to that next in part 2. Stay safe and stay free, people.